What's going on, everybody? It's Frito here for Your Overwatch. Overwatch dropped a brand new type of experimental card, this time partnering up with 3 different content creators in order to specialize the changes from their, unique point of view. So this one is going to be really wacky and not intended to go live. However, I think maybe a couple of the changes might even sound like a good idea for the real game, but it will be played for $10,000 of prize money. So although it's all fun and games, those fun and games are going to go into a tournament that creators going to play for coming up soon. So there's practical implications to these wacky changes, though. Let's take a look and see what you can expect if you're interested in hopping into the experimental card to try these out. I'm not going to look at them too critically, but kind of give you the gist of what's going on, keeping in mind all the heroes were changed, so we can't go in too much depth. So let's just try to enjoy the wackiness a little bit here. Remember, Flats is responsible for these outrageous tank buffs. I think these are really over the top, and I tried to look carefully at the patch notes to see if this is going to 5v5. No, Flats is just over buffing tanks. So enjoy being able to pick 2 of them in the experimental card.
Today's video sponsor is NordVPN. If you use the internet at all, you need to be worried about cybersecurity. Get yourself protected today with NordVPN. The way it works, Nord will encrypt your internet traffic, hide your IP, and your virtual location. All super easy at a click of a button. Third parties can no longer spy on you. Using the internet without a VPN is like bungee jumping without a cable, or playing Overwatch Ranked without a Smurf. Those are about the same levels of risk. Masking your region can help you get access to deals on virtual items or streaming services that you might not otherwise have access to. But as a gamer, NordVPN can help you bypass bandwidth throttling. And protection goes for games as well. Hiding your IP means you won't be vulnerable to DDoS attacks, which happen on tons of games nowadays. Check our link in the description to head on over to NordVPN/YourOverwatch and take advantage of Cyber Month, where they have a 73% off discount. You're looking for holiday savings? Well, this is it, folks. Head on over to our link in the description to NordVPN.com/YourOverwatch and take advantage of this huge deal right now.
Starting off with D.Va, Pilot D.Va can now 2-shot a squishy with melees. Thought the remake was bad enough. Double melee will assassinate a healer. Defense matrix bigger in size. Her boosters now go 4 seconds, which means you're flying across the map now with that much duration. And the speed goes up as well. So even farther still due to the duration increase, but as you're just going to be a heat-seeking missile flying through the sky as D.Va. Really, really overpowered. And this last change to her eject when she's leaving her mech allows you to fly through the sky with a ton of midair control. Keep in mind, you can fall down as Baby D.Va to not only remech kill someone, but melee them to death as well. So enjoy that. Orisa, the most important change, of course, wearing a Christmas hat. And her base health is way tankier now. Instead of this split, it's now 399 armor and 1 health. I think this is Flat's sense of humor showing through on this one. You move fast while firing. Fortify's nerfed, but Halt is buffed. And her barrier's pretty insignificant, though you do get it more often. Only 300 health on the barrier. So this is kind of a theme on Flats' tank changes, I think, where you're going to be really brawly and aggressive and almost like Overwatch 2-esque, I'd say. Some of these look like nerfs, but keep in mind this is a lot of armor health. So there's a bunch of characters that will struggle to ever really do significant damage to Orisa now, despite not having much barrier. Next up is Reinhardt. You have to think Flats went over the top with this one. Realistically, more so looks like the Overwatch 2 change in a nutshell. So getting a sense of what it feels like to have 2 fire strikes that move faster and do a little bit less damage might be fun for you, though his barrier did go back to that old 2,000 hit point value, which in the context of everything, especially when like Orisa doesn't have much shield, right? Ryan's going to be really strong, that alone, but also gets a bit of a stopgap with his own personal health at 525. A big change that a lot of Rhine players have wanted back in the game, where Earthshatter now hits you on the ground for 3 seconds total, bringing his solo carry in the ult fight back. Blocking an enemy Earthshatter now shows up in the kill feed, which is an awesome thing that should just exist. We asked for that a long time ago, but Earthshatter gets further buffs where it does 400 damage at the point of impact of the hammer. 400? I mean, that's outrageous. And I almost forgot, when you block an Earthshatter, Ryan automatically basically taunts with the voice line, "You shame yourself." So really, really fun stuff. Steadfast, 10% more as well, so you're not getting knocked around as much. But this makes him more health, brawlier, bigger damage on the ult, 2 fire strikes. I think you're going to have a lot of fun playing Reinhardt on this patch. Although these look crazy from the tank point of view, I have seen the other changes as well, so I know the tank ones are out of line, right? So I think tanks are way stronger in proportion to the rest of the cast on this build of the game. But onto Roadhog now, a hero I know irritates Flats being as strong as he is, so we'll see what he did to him. Significant drops in health and damage. I mean, this is a huge nerf on scrap gun pellet damage, especially when you think back to like Rein's shield getting buffed and this number going down. Hog is going to be quite bad against tanks, I think, all of a sudden, though you'll still be able to pick squishies. And in order to do that, to compensate for some of the breakpoints, I think they put more damage into the hook itself and give it the 6-second cooldown again. And he can fly with whole hog. I mean, this is really cool. That means you can like get up to wacky locations, kind of like when Sig's using his ult, right? You can get yourself into the high ground spot or flank or do wacky things with whole hog. That sounds really fun, to be honest. But overall, I think this version of Roadhog makes him a lot more punishable, both from the mechanics point of view, but also just like he's going to be a weaker tank overall and far less forgiving when you play him. I think a lot of ranked players might want some of these changes to come through, actually. Sigma now is tankier with 500 total health, more mid-air control as well, able to slow his descent, losing his shield entirely. No more barrier for Sigma. He's an off tank like Roadhog. So that's a pretty big ability to lose. What did he get back in order to compensate for that? He gets grasp more often and moves faster with it. Okay, so he's got more individual control to maneuver that. And well, that might mean you may feel a little bit more like Diva, able to swoop in and eat in ability, or especially ultimate, with grasp. So that adds for some playmaking, though he is kind of vulnerable to some things when using grasp. So I wouldn't get too crazy with it, but I'm actually pretty interested by this trade-off of losing barrier. I think ultimately like the barrier would be way better than having this, but it is definitely an interesting way to take the character. Accretion gets a bit more damage, but can be reflected or ate by defense matrix. And Sigma will now say yes every time he uses it. On to Winston now. We know Flats has a big bias for main tanks, so he basically just gets a mini version of Steadfast, a 30% variant, and deals 100% more damage to deployable objects, which, not gonna lie, I'm kind of getting tired of how Symmetra is so strong on so many maps and feels like her turrets solo carries winning an objective, so this makes a hard counter to that now. Back like it used to be in early days of Overwatch, where the health was lower on them, Winston used to just be able to zap around and easily wipe them all out. Well, once they buffed those sentry turrets, then it took Winston a lot longer, meaning, you know, he kind of didn't counter them as easily. So that's back in the game. Jump Pack and Primal get huge buffs. Some of this I'm working from memory, but I'm pretty sure this implies that the damage radius of this whole ability is bigger than I remember. Up to 100 damage landing on enemies. And the travel speed is increased by almost a third. Keep in mind, that jump pack applies to Primal Rage as well, where Flats gave him an extra 500 health. So you better be sleeping Winston in Primal, otherwise he's gonna stomp over your entire team. Quite over the top, I have to say. Wrecking Ball got a bunch of complex changes that I think overall I'm gonna just say probably nerfs him more than buffs him. A few like quality of life things where he's gonna move faster, be able to jump just when rolling around in ball form a lot higher in order to get up onto things, and coupled with the fact that Pile Driver is easier to use, there's going to be more locations you can use that. So a lot more flexibility when playing Wrecking Ball, but certain key numbers such as doing less damage, gaining less shields. Overall, I think you're going to feel this is mostly a nerf. But you will notice that you could change directions a lot faster, your cooldowns come up a bit quicker, and the shield lasts a little bit longer. But overall, I think a nerf probably. But maybe not for the highest tier of player, which maybe gets more use out of the movement speed buff. I'm not so sure. I think for weaker ball players, you just want to smash into a thing and do more damage. But for the top ball players, maybe they like have a special flair with this. So that's going to be something you want to pay attention to in the creator tournament that's coming up. Last up in the tank category is Zarya, who probably needs some buffs here in order to compete with some of the other mega buffs that came through. And I think Flats gave her a little bit of love. Zarya's primary fire damage goes up by a bit, and I believe because of the charge mechanic, it gets applied by a percentage. Then overall, her damage should just be higher, I'm pretty sure, but I have to check on that. Her ult fire now has increased knockback and no longer hurts yourself. So that applies in two ways, I think, where you're going to feel like you can rocket jump all over the place now, getting to special locations you couldn't before, but as well, knocking people off the map with a very carefully placed bomb might happen, like you're playing pool out there on Ilio's well. Hitting a secondary fire right behind someone might just push them into the well. That kind of thing sometimes happens, but with a number like this, where it is going to be 2.5 times more effective than before, that might be a play you can make on this new card. The barriers have more health and more size, which will mean gaining charges easier, and tanking, quote unquote, to like make space, step in front of damage, get in the way of things, makes the bubble better in that way. But I will say, if you're trying to save an individual target, sometimes the bubble being smaller might mean that the enemy doesn't hit it as easily, and it might save the target a little bit. I'm thinking like when the enemy Roadhog hooks something in and you bubble it, do you want that bubble to be really big so all the enemy players can easily hit it? Maybe not, but I think most cases it's probably a buff. The next series of changes are from the DPS player Samju, and I'd say his are a bit conservative, and I wonder if he knew how much Flats was going to buff tanks when he decided to do these, because the DPS ones are way less crazy to me. We'll run through these a little bit quicker. Ashe, 2 charges on Coach Gun, which is going to be important for her when going up against a Winston that destroys her, so kind of like Junkrat, who has the flexibility to be aggressive and defensive. With positioning, Ashe will be quite flexible. Couple small changes, cooldown on Dynamite, slightly faster hip fire, but this one, the aim down sights movement penalty being reduced significantly means that you're going to be able to strafe around and really have a lot more freedom to stay in ADS as Ashe, which is important when she's getting overwhelmed. So those look good on paper, but again, she's going up against super tanks now, so we'll see how that pans out. The crease changes, not too crazy. Fan the Hammer will do 5 more damage. He can roll midair, longer CD on flashbang, and most importantly, Deadeye now spawns more tumbleweeds. Bastion's recon fire, bullet spread reduced by 15%, and more armor in tank form, which I think is pretty scary. Doomfist gets a small nerf in health, 225 base, but gets more from landing on targets with his best defense passive. Overall, I'd say that would be a buff if you're any good at Doomfist. And you will notice the Meteor Strike landing speeds up quite a bit to instantly, okay? Don't misread this. This is 0.05 seconds. As soon as you press it, you basically land on that target and nuke it. Comically fast on the ultimate now. Genji's got a few fun buffs. His Shuriken recovery buffed a bit, so you'll be able to fire them off faster, but you wall climb faster and can refund your double jump when doing so, giving you a lot of flexibility to move around the map however you want. Hanzo has scatter arrow back. Not only that, storm arrows just straight up bounce off walls like scatter used to. So each individual storm arrow can bounce off surfaces up to 5 times. That is outrageous. And he can lunge more often. Junkrat gets his power rearranged a bit with less normal damage, but more concussion mine damage. But now Total Mayhem is a really useful ability where you get double the grenades that you're used to in a wider area. So dive bombing the enemy team's backline might net you in a hilarious amount of kills. Pharah's change will either excite you or terrify you, depending on your feelings about the character. You can now fall faster. Think of like a Tetris block, meaning Pharah's dive bomb playstyle is way more deadly, and it's easier to get out of line of sight of enemy hit scans and maneuver around the map. This is quite a massive buff. Otherwise, couple cooldown buffs, not too significant. Next up is Reaper, who gets what I'm gonna call an outrageous buff. This is the silliest one that Samju cooked up. Buffing the pellet spread on the shotguns is bad enough, but after you come out of Shadow Step, you get a movement buff for 6 seconds? What? This is outrageously broken. Soldier 76 gets some buffs I have seen floated around in the community for quite some time when trying to get this character in line. Sprint automatically reloads the pulse rifle after 3 seconds of continuous use, which is like a fun quality of life buff people have asked for, and Tactical Visor has a little bit better damage when in use to kind of compensate for the fact that you can't headshot with it, which means sometimes you'd rather just be shooting than using your ult. But this buff, along with, remember, it's been buffed with its range and stuff before, that's going to feel pretty good. Sombra more or less gets her Overwatch 2 buffs, at least the ones you could put in an experimental card. Not all of them, but hacked targets take 20% increased damage, so effectively like a mini Discord effect on them, but it has a longer cooldown at 12 seconds. seconds, and her machine pistol is a little bit better with tighter spread by 10%. Symmetra's teleporter now buffs your movement after you use it. That is an outrageous buff. Imagine a Reinhardt, after being buffed the way Flats buffed him, teleporting into your backline and getting a natural movement speed buff from the teleporter, and you also can speed boost. A little bit of coordination is going to go really far with that, and if we're theory crafting on what comp is going to dominate the experimental card tournament when the creators are playing for $10,000 of total prize pool money, I think that is going to be really hard to stop. Torbjorn's turret gets a little less damage, but shoots faster normally, has more hammer damage, and even more when he's overloaded. So when you hammer during overload, you do 125 per swing, which means you're going to two-shot most things. That's incredible. Tracer recall restores blink charges, but has a slightly lower cooldown and has more ammo in her pulse pistols. Now, these sound like outrageous buffs in the live game context. Not so sure what I think about it against the super tanks. Remember, a character like Orisa has nearly 400 armor health now, and D.Va's super powered. Winston's over there with 1500 HP in primal. Like, I don't know if this is enough for Tracer to compete with those tankier armor-based tank characters. So we'll see how that pans out. Widowmaker has a instant reset on the grappling hook cooldown with Infrasight, which means after you launch yourself into the air, you can use Infrasight to then launch yourself again and go full Spider-Man through the sky, setting up for some insane trick shots. And as well, her SMG gets a slight buff. Last roll now is on to supports, which was suggested by the phenomenal Brigitte player Violet. Ana can nano herself like she can in Deathmatch, and will get a sleep dart reset when you get an elimination on that target, which is an outrageous change, and certain team comps would utterly fall over with this change in the game. We already know Hog and Ball don't look too strong to me on this card, but if they were, Ana would solely just destroy the enemy team, because it's like you get the sleep on the target, then another sleep. That's one of the biggest downsides of picking Ana, that she's all in on those mid-fight cooldowns and playmaking. So much so that a lot of other characters that are always contributing are often easier to play, but this means she can utterly take over a team fight. So we'll see what the other support changes are to combat that. Baptiste gets some pretty amazing offensive tools now. In order to heal himself, he has to use his biotic launcher. Those nades heal him, but remember, that means he only can heal with the splash, because I don't think you can directly hit yourself in the knees to apply the full direct hit effect on yourself. So his self-heal goes way down, which might be fair because he still has lamp, but his regenerative burst now, instead of healing him, damage enemies. I think what this means is Bap is going to be a lot worse when you're out poking him from range, because he can't just heal himself repeatedly. But overall, the dive tanks got outrageous, so I think he'll still struggle on this build. But a pretty fun change is his exo boots will now Mario stomp enemy characters with 40 damage to enemies within 4 meters upon landing. Not so big to write home about, but I'm sure someone's going to get an elimination with this, and that will be funny to see. Brigitte got reworked in a pretty interesting way, where she now has 5 repair packs up from 3, but no longer has Inspire healing, which is the big AoE effect that was really strong when active, but also kind of a poor mechanic for lower ranked players that struggle to manage it as well as a top ranked Brig. Remember, Violet is one of the best Brigs you'll ever watch unranked. So this is their way to kind of fix some of Brigitte's problems, and pretty interesting. I'm not sure what the numbers will pan out to be in terms of total healing, but an important aspect of this is Brig no longer can stack healing sources on top of each other as much, where you'll still be able to pack and rally armor someone, but you used to be able to also get Inspire stacked at the same time. So this spreads out Brigitte's healing to be more reliable for longer and more readily available, but less peak amounts of healing. And of course, still does all the other Brig things like stunning and whip-shotting and playing her position really well, which if you want to learn how to do that with Brig, Violet is a great player to watch for that. Lucio got some buffs I'm really excited about because I love this character. Sound barrier cost is reduced by 30%, which is massive. That's going to put it in timing to beat out lots of other ults, which the rushdown comp with Rein, Lucio, and Symmetra is looking better and better every time I look at this. And on top of that, if you land on an enemy's head with sound barrier, it deals massive damage. I mean, they don't even put a number here, so what does that mean? It's just gonna one-hit anything, I guess. All right, fine, I'll just say it. Way too good. Okay, that's outrageous. This next change, though, I think is pretty reasonable and maybe something that would be really fun to use, where you get 15% increased fire rate while wall riding, and after you bounce off a wall, you only get half of that. So I guess 7.5%. But either way, bouncing off walls will increase your fire rate speed. So it gives you an incentive to do that. And I think a pretty cool mechanic to get you into that and gives you even more output for achieving that skill ceiling. The changes to Mercy make her a bit more complicated and gives you some more interesting decisions to make with your play. Mercy's healing number changes might look confusing in these patch notes, but it just means that you want to be switching targets more often. If you stay on a target for 2 seconds, your healing number will be reduced to 40. So what this means, pocketing a character will be far less effective, especially for lower ranked players going up against a Pharah or something, or some, super carry with that Mercy beam attached. It's pretty difficult sometimes to overtake the damage threshold required to get beyond that healing number. Well, now Mercy is just way less effective when pocketing something. So to get more value out of her healing, she's kind of got to move around quite a bit. But overall, I would just say this is a nerf to Mercy, I think. In the healing category, let's see if the other buffs compensate for it. Valkyrie killing blows extend the duration by 3 seconds. So that means when you're ulting as Mercy and flying at the enemy Widowmaker, popping that a limb, but more importantly, the killing blow, actually, you got to get in the kill feed, gives you even more Valkyrie. So a really fun mechanic, but I don't know if it's too easy to keep Valkyrie for the next team fight, right? I doubt that. More in those extended fights, you'll probably maintain Valkyrie longer, but I think, and I could be wrong on this, these healing numbers will apply to Valk as well, pretty sure. So we'll have to see. Pharah's movement got insane on this build, but Mercy's a lot worse at pocketing her, so I don't know how that's gonna end up playing out. It might just mean you just go in faster and dominate, but less of the stay up in the air forever and never die type play style. We'll have to see how people adjust and learn how to play this wacky build in time for that tournament. But one last change on Mercy, you can cancel and refund half of the cooldown of res if you use secondary fire. So you want to nope out of there after you try to swoop in to make an aggro res, you can save yourself as the enemy responds. And that sounds like it's not very good, but I think it's going to be much better because you could kind of bait out a bunch of cooldowns. And ultimately Overwatch a lot of times is just the positioning and cooldown exchange. So you can feel more empowered to go after a riskier res and bait out some aggro towards you, but fly away. Although you won't get the res, you'll get a huge swing of momentum of abilities, right? Especially if you move the tanks to chase you and things like that. So we'll have to see if that's worth the other downsides of the new Mercy. But moving on to Moira now, who now has some cleansing abilities, which is going to be important when going up against a character like Ana, as I think it would cleanse Sleep Dart as well when she has those frequently. But let's break it down. If you run out of energy, Biotic Grasp consumes Moira's own health. So this is going to make you think about when you use it because you might be burning yourself. Biotic Orb gets some complicated changes. Enemies hit by at least 100 damage of the same Biotic Orb are slowed by 30% for a second and a half. That feels quite annoying. And allies who are healed by at least 100 will be cleansed of all status effects. So that's kind of a important distinction. So against anti-nade, well, you won't be able to reach the healing value required because you're not doing any healing against it in order to apply the effect. But up against things like Sombra hack, you would. Moira's Fade cleanses status effects from players Moira passes through and allied players that are around her when it ends. So kind of a toned down version of that Moira rework cleanse that was applied, I don't know, a year ago on the experimental card. This is like a mini version of that, where she has to run through her teammates to do it or land near them when she escapes out of Fade. Quite strong, I'd say. Moira looks pretty nutty on this build, not gonna lie. And when Lucio buffed as well, I'm gonna say Lucio Moira is going to be over the top, I think, unless this last Zen change can prove me otherwise. For the most part, Zen's getting nerfed here, which I would say is a mistake when Moira's getting better, but some interesting mechanics are at play here. Discord nerfed by 5%, only 20% damage amp now, but can be applied to barriers, turrets, and other attackable objects. That's pretty big considering something like Reinhardt's barrier is stronger now. So you can actually damage amp onto a barrier, I believe. We'll see if that's enough for it to have this lower value. I could be wrong, but I think in general, what's going to happen is between the sim speed and Lucio, I think the rushdown comps will simply just close the distance before you can work down a barrier. The orbs also lose a bunch of things here. It no longer reveals the enemy around a corner, and the line of sight return time on both the Discord and Harmony orb is reduced as well. Transcendence healing goes down, but it does apply Discord orbs to nearby enemies. So that's the big buff here, where you can go Zenyatta into the enemy team and be very offensive. That's kind of ridiculous, and I'm not sure if that's enough to save Zen from some of these other nerfs, but imagine anything running in with that and how easy the team fight would be if the entire enemy team took 20% more damage while getting healed. Like, that's just an outrageous ult. But I wonder now, only healing 1200, are there certain DPS ults that can easily break through that, or at least combination of ultimates? Probably the case. But hey, that's all 32 heroes. We try to zip through this as best we could. What do you think about any of the changes? Should any be going to live? Let us know in the comment section down below. I'm interested to see the competitive tournament on this wacky set of changes and what it teaches us about the game. That's one thing about testing out changes in Overwatch ever, is you always can kind of test your theories and see if they play out in practice. What do you guys think is going to be the best team comp on this experimental card? Let us know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, click subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter. Hit us a follow on there to continue the conversation. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.